Should the Building Bridges Initiative-sponsored constitutional amendments take effect, then the Kenyan government will have to effect structural changes to its budget to provide for a more expensive devolved system. The amendment to devolve at least 35% of revenue may push the government into further borrowing to finance recurrent expenditure against public finance law. Experts are calling for proper planning to ensure economic stability in the coming years. Sam Gituko reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think
Members of county assemblies and county governors have been upbeat about the promise to devolve at least 35% of ordinary revenues. While this may herald major shifts and spur faster growth at county level, BBI proponents have been economical with the impact on public finance management. Deputy President William Ruto has questioned the possibility of raising the county allocations from the current 15% to 35%. But the National Treasury says the government has never reneged on its promise.
Kama imeshindikana kulipa 15% kwa counties, hii 35% munasema wananchi wanataka kujua itatoka wapi.
It's not a mere statement. It's a well thought out, planned engagements undertaken and something that can be done, and we have the resources to do it.
Despite delays in disbursement of funds to counties, the national government has since 2013 met the constitutional threshold of devolving at least 15% of ordinary revenues. In the current financial year, the government hopes to raise 1.63 trillion shillings as ordinary revenues. Out of this, 316.5 billion shillings was allocated as equitable share to counties, representing 19.4%. Should the BBI-backed constitutional amendments be enacted into law, out of the 1.7 trillion shillings projected to be collected in the financial year 2021-2022, up to 617 billion shillings will have to be devolved, being at least 35%. And after charging 1 trillion shillings against the exchequer as debt repayment, the government may be left with just 147 billion shillings from the ordinary revenue to finance its programs.
So realistically, if you're talking about numbers and the perception, and the context of the economy today, it's not realistic to have 35%. So that's the whole idea, but 35% is a bit ambitious.
In the next financial year, starting July 2021, the government intends to spend 685 billion shillings on development projects. Another 115 billion shillings is marked for consolidated fund services. Yet, the National Executive requires 1.2 trillion shillings for recurrent expenditure. The figures contained in this year's budget policy statement, worth 3.02 trillion shillings, of a budget whose allocation to the counties is set at 326 billion shillings. It will strain an economy whose revenue sources have been shrinking due to the impact of COVID-19 effects.
We are creating a public finance crisis because it's very easy for somebody to go to court and say you're using debt to finance current expenditure, which will be illegal. And that's the thing that we miss in this conversation. And so the problem is not about transferring 35%. It's about where the funds, government funds.
14 functions have been devolved in the Constitution, yet 3 crucial functions that should be managed by the counties remain heavily funded and executed at the national level. Could agriculture, health and roads provide a possible avenue of further devolution of services and funds?
We need to do an audit that are all the functions have been devolved first. And looking at the budget that is, what are the functions that are remaining with the county government, with the national government, with the money that have been allocated in the previous budgets, that we can move to county governments. Then we can have a proper and a sober conversation on what percentage are we moving to counties.
For the University of Nairobi's senior economist, Dr. Joy Kiru, the concern is more on the caliber of MCAs. She says, quote, if MCAs demanded car grants to pass BBI bill, even if we had the money, can we trust them to oversight 35% of our resources? She says that before devolving more funds to the counties, the country needs to fix integrity in the crop of leaders at county executives and assemblies. End of quote. Economists agree that for more funds to hit the county coffers, more resources are needed, with the possibility of higher taxes should the tax net or the tax base not be expanded proportionately. Sam Gituko, Citizen TV, Nairobi.